Welcome again to the beta launch of MetaReviewer, a collaboration-minded platform for evidence synthesis. We want to thank the National Science Foundation for funding this work, and thank you all for your interest and for joining us today. During the presentation, please feel free to ask questions at any time by putting them in the Q&A. We'll do our best to answer questions as we go along, and we'll also have some dedicated Q&A time at the end of the webinar. My name is Megan Austin. I'm a principal researcher at AIR. I'm joined today by Ryan Williams, the project co-PI, and Josh Palanin, the PI. Josh will be providing us with a live demo of MetaReviewer today. But first, I will turn things over to Ryan to introduce the motivation and the vision behind MetaReviewer.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today, and I'm excited to kick this off and give a little bit of the background on what our thinking was when we got involved with this project. You know, I think this was in many ways kind of the product of many years of doing systematic reviews and meta-analyses, and we realized that there really wasn't something out there that could really help somebody first getting involved with systematic reviewing and meta-analysis really start to organize and catalog all of the information that they need to navigate and take that through the various processes of the systematic review. And so folks, and we've done this before, folks turn to a myriad of different options and software packages ranging from standalone spreadsheets to hierarchical database products and meta-analysis specific software, all of which require different levels of technical expertise and experience. And it can get confusing. And it took us years and many projects to really develop the systems we put into place for our projects. But again, we wanted to build something that was portable, useful for the types of reviews that we do, but also something that's accessible for folks who are getting involved with systematic reviewing for the first time or early career reviewers. So we wanted something that was oriented to novice reviewers, facilitated browser-based, cloud-based, collaborative work, and had an equity focus, right? We wanted software that was accessible and primarily financially accessible. And so that was kind of the foundation of our thinking for MetaReviewer. So with the support of NSF, we've been working on this project that is going to be really kind of end-to-end collaborative systematic review software. It's going to help folks work together on screening, coding, information extraction. And so this is where we kind of are in the beta version of MetaReviewer. And Josh is going to talk through what this looks like. So under the beta launch capabilities, we're really going to demonstrate codebook and database creation and basic information extraction, so study and effect size data from primary study reports.
Ryan, thanks, Megan. And thank you all listening live, and to everybody who's taking a look at this video online. I echo what Megan and Ryan said in terms of our excitement for this project. And so the first thing you're going to do is, if you haven't yet, you probably have though by now, go to metareviewer.org and take a look at our landing page. Once you're here, if you start at the top here and click on this Try MetaReviewer button, this is actually how you're going to sign up to be a beta tester. So once you click on this button, I'm just going to do it now. It will pull up this form, this access form, fill it out, a couple short questions. Really our goal here is to make sure you're not a bot, make sure you're a real person, and that we're giving access to someone who's going to use the software. Someone from our team will take a look at your credentials and send you some login information. Once you do that, we promise to get it back to you within a business day. And if you've already signed up for this using the Try Webinar, Try MetaReviewer button, we will be sending you the login information shortly after this webinar ends, so you can get right into it. Once you receive that login credential, go to the sign in button here. And this is the login page. And you log in, you are greeted by your project management page. Now, when you log in for the first time, you are not going to see all of these various projects, and you can see all the projects that I've loaded as I've been testing and actually using MetaReviewer for the last year actually now. You're going to see a blank page with no projects listed here, ready for you to create your own project. So that's what we're going to walk through next here. And really this click here to set up a new project. That's where a lot of the actions are going to occur to really help you get going in MetaReviewer. So I'm going to click on this, and we're going to actually set up a live new project. So the first thing you'll see actually is a pop-up that asks you to sign into a Google account and grant MetaReviewer some access to some of your documents. Now this, don't be alarmed by it. This is part of the program, and you'll see how we use this functionality in a second. And essentially what MetaReviewer is doing is it's going to look at a specific Google document that you will create, that we've actually created a template for you. And based on the information that's in that Google document, it's going to create the coding form that you'll actually extract and put information into. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, and click through the warnings here and continue. And once I do that, we're all set up and ready to go. So I'm just going to give this project, we're going to call this webinar presentation. I'm on number 4 now. So I'm going to put number 4 and click create project. And every time you do something in MetaReviewer and it saves successfully, you're going to get a little green box. Hopefully you guys could see that popped up kind of quickly, but you're going to get a little green box that says that's saved automatically. That should happen every time you click on something. So we'll click next. And here the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a user. Now, right now, the beta functionality is that when I click on this drop down of select user, I'm able to see all of the users that have beta access to MetaReviewer. In the coming weeks, we're going to change this this interface slightly so that you have to actually type in an email of a person who you know has MetaReviewer access. But for now, I'm just going to click on this drop down and we'll see the list of folks who have access. And I'm going to click on my good friend and colleague, Megan, who's going to join this project with me. And then I can select a role for her. There's 3 different roles available, admin, member, and reader. I won't go into all of the differences here, but essentially this has to do with what the individual can access and what they can change in the project. Project admin has the ability to delete a project, for example. You probably do not want a project member or a data reader to have that ability, so we leave that to the admin only. This is a good time to mention that all of these steps and much more information is available in our user guide, and I will show you how to access that in a minute. Quick editor's note, taking a break from our live webinar to show you where the MetaReviewer user guide actually lives, because during the webinar, I didn't get a chance to actually showcase it. On almost any page, if you click on the How to Use MetaReviewer button, a new tab will open with the user's guide. In the future, we plan to update this link with more resources and material, but for now, that's where the user guide lives. Okay, back to our live webinar. But if you wanted to see the full breakdown of what the different roles and accessibility is, it's in that user guide. So for now, I'm going to add Megan. You don't have to add any users to your project at this project setup phase. If you're not ready to, you can just hit next and the setup will continue. Okay, now I'm into what I think is probably one of the cooler features of MetaReviewer, and that's what we call the coding form wizard. And this is really where I think we're starting to really shape and help especially novice researchers or people who are new to conducting a meta-analysis or a systematic review. And the coding form wizard, it really has 2 primary functions. The first one is it's a template that has example items in it that you would commonly see in a systematic review and meta-analysis. And the second thing that the coding form wizard does and the templates that it produce is it actually creates the system, the hierarchical relational database system that MetaReviewer is based off of. So you don't have to do any of the work of creating those fancy relational databases that we often talk about as being the gold standard for systematic reviews. The templates are going to do that for you. So how do you get to a template? So you use this coding form wizard, and there's two options here to start with. You can actually create your own from scratch. We do not recommend this, mainly because it's all a graphical user interface based, and it's pretty complicated. So we leave it there just in case you really are curious what the behind the scene is. But click on the use a MetaReviewer coding form template. And then we've gone a little bit further with these questions to help you identify the type of systematic review and meta-analysis that you're conducting. So we have 4 different questions here. I'm not going to go through each one of them in detail, but they're essentially asking, do you plan to use quantitative information in your study? Do you plan to have multiple groups, like multiple conditions in your meta-analysis? Who's involved in your sample? Is it children, adults, or both? And then is there going to be any sort of implementation fidelity that you're going to code? Based on your answers to all 4 of these questions, a different coding form template is going to populate for you. If you're not sure what you should select, or you're just trying this out because it's in the beta version, you can click on the last answer and it's going to give you a complete list of all of those items in the coding form template. So I'm just going to go ahead and click through a couple of these just to pull up an example. And when I click complete, this section down here populates, and this link will take you to the appropriate coding form template. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. You can see this is template number 4. And now in your Google Drive version, you will not have all of the editing access that I do, of course. It will appear as a read-only document. And the way to get around the read-only aspect is if you go just up to File and click Make a Copy, you'll be able to pull up this copy document, and you're going to put it right into your own Google Drive folder. I don't need to do that because I have access to them all. And I'm actually not going to use this template to showcase the next step, but I am going to show you just a little bit of what this template can do. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you all can see this a little bit better. Essentially, each one of these tables is a different item in your codebook and some characteristics of that item. So we've got the name of the item, the type of response option that you would like. So, would you like it to be a drop down? Would you like it to be a radio button? Would you like it to be text file? What's the title of the item? Is the item required or not? And then what are the choices? So you can see this is set up just like you would, an Excel file or any other software, except in this case, it's a Word document, or excuse me, a Google document that you're simply adding text into. Now you can see this is a really long document. This is 48 pages long, so I'm not going to walk through all of these different tables. Except to say that we've also got these shorter tables in here, and you probably saw that at the beginning. Each one of these shorter tables indicates a different page in your code book. So I mentioned that this is a hierarchical relational database. The page is related to that hierarchy. So you actually create different sections in your code book related to the different characteristics you plan to code. So for example, if you're since we're on the sample page, we'll take the sample. If you've got 2 samples, an intervention and a comparison group sample, you probably want to capture characteristics of both of those 2 samples, both of those 2 conditions. So you create 2 different sample rows, 2 different sample records in MetaReviewer, capture that information for each of those different samples. And then when you get to the effect size page, which I'll show you in a minute, for each effect size contrast that you're interested in capturing information on, you actually tell MetaReviewer, hey, use sample 1 and sample 2 for this particular contrast. And so you do that for each of the sections in your code book, identifying the various groups or characteristics until you get down to the effect size section. To show you that we do have an effect size section, and I'm going to show you a little bit of how it looks in MetaReviewer in a minute. Here are actually all the different choices for effect sizes that MetaReviewer will help you estimate, and it's all set up for you behind the scenes with this template. So You're going to take this template, change it, modify it to fit your needs. And then once you're done modifying it, I'm actually going to take this one and we're going to click next in our create a project setup. And here's where a lot of the automation and the magic happens. So if I go back on this page, it says, hey, go to the URL, find where it says /d/, and then grab this long piece of text right before it says edit. So if we go back to the Google document here, this is what that looks like, the /d right here. And we're going to take this, I'm just going to highlight it all, copy it. And it says the survey, or another name for that is the coding form was implemented and imported successfully. So in a minute, I'll be able to show you exactly what that coding form looks like. So if this was your own project, you would have a fully functional coding form available to capture the study information. So the last piece of that puzzle, though, is you want to take citations and studies that are ready to be coded and put them into MetaReviewer as well. So how do you do that? So the first thing is you go to this import citations page, and there's a little file to download here. We're going to click on it just to show you what it looks like. And this file should look pretty familiar to you right away, especially if you've downloaded citations from EBSCO or PsycInfo or ERIC or anything. Each one of these columns is our usual identifier of a citation. So we've got, author list, title, publication, abstract, everything that we usually download with those citation files. With one big change, we've got 3 columns for ID variables. And these ID variables are what MetaReviewer is going to use to keep track of all of the citations and the studies that you plan to code. So let me show you an example of one that I've already got filled out here. So this is the example we're going to be using for the next few minutes. I've got 19 citations, some of which have complete information, some of them don't, just like you would typically see in a citation list. And each one of these unique citations has its own unique citation ID. And now we suggest starting off the citation ID with the letter C and then some number combination after it. More on the user guide, in the user guide as to how to create these IDs, but that's how we've set it up right now. So that part's relatively simple. The cool part, or the thing that MetaReviewer is going to do for you, is manipulate these study IDs. And essentially what is happening here is that every citation row with a study ID, so this one and these few and these down here, those are the citations that you are telling MetaReviewer are eligible for coding, should be identified as studies you're going to extract information from and put into MetaReviewer. So I've given a study ID to all of the studies that we've identified as eligible for coding. So anything with a blank here we will not be creating essentially a page for that study where we'll put information into it. Okay, so that's automation number 1. Automation number 2 is anytime a citation, multiple citation rows share the same study ID. So in this case, we've got 3 study IDs all with the same, or excuse me, 3 citation rows all with the same study ID. These 3 citations will all be linked together to form one study. And this is really common, right? In the studies that we see authors, primary authors, take a particular intervention or a data set and split it off into multiple citations. But really, all of those citations represent one complete study. So we want some way in MetaReviewer to link all of those studies together, all those citations together to form one study. So doing it in this way, this ID variable way, will do that for you automatically. If you're wondering, this B column here, that's set up for something we plan to do later on when it comes to full text screening and perhaps abstract screening. Right now, it's just there as a placeholder and you don't have to do anything with it. In fact, you could put as many values as you want in there. MetaReviewer will not do anything with them. But for now, it's just living there waiting. Okay, so let's go back to importing citations. This little pop-up comes up. I'm going to click Browse. This is my file on my desktop. I'm going to open it and upload the file and cross our fingers. And voila, success. Citations were imported. It said 19 records were processed. So we go ahead and click Finish. And now I think we created, it was webinar presentation number 4. And just to show you what it looks like right away, here are our 19 citations. Here are our 5 studies that we identified. Okay, now just one other quick note about setting up a project. Everything that I showed you in the project creation page can be accessed via the project management page over here on the right-hand side. So if you start your own project and you want to name it and you just want to access a coding form template and then start manipulating it, but you don't have citations ready yet, you don't have the coding form ready yet, you don't even have users to add yet, you don't have to do anything other than create the project, name the project, and everything else you can do using these buttons to the right. So you can essentially come back and recreate that project setup. So now on to navigation. Let's do a little bit more clicking around in the projects page. So to do that, I'm going to go to webinar presentation number 2. This is the one that I'm using for the live demo. And I'm going to start by just clicking back on this citations database. Now, this is the exact same database I just imported. There's 19 citations here. I'm going to click on this first one. And you can see this is the information that was in our spreadsheet that we've imported into MetaReviewer. The title, the abstract, the article type, publication year, a bunch of information down the right-hand side. We've actually got additional fields and other radio buttons that we plan to update over the next few months and years. So actually additional information here that it's not quite ready for use, but is there if you want to use it in your own way. The key thing here, though, is this studies panel right here, just right here in the middle. This says this particular citation is linked to one study. This is study S9001. Occasionally, one citation will be linked to multiple studies. So if you wanted to do some manual linking after you've imported everything, you click this link study button and then put your cursor in there and just start typing the study number. If you said you wanted to link it to this one as well, you could go ahead and click link to study, and this citation would be linked to that study as well. I'm not going to click that for now because it's not, but you could if you wanted to. Then if you wanted to add additional documentation, you could do so here, and then a little place for notes about the citation and some notes about the history. Okay, nothing too groundbreaking in that section. So let's go over to the studies database. And here again, we've got our 5 studies that are eligible for coding. And you can see if I just pause right here in the studies database, the studies landing page right here, we can see here's some project management things already set up for you. And most of these columns are manipulated inside what we call the individual study page, which I'll click on in a minute. But this page itself is also sortable and filterable. So if you wanted to search for, there's only my name in here once, but if you wanted to search for my name and all the studies that I'm associated with for coding, if we just started typing my name in here, it would filter out the rest of them and I'd find my study right away. But for now, let's go ahead and click on this particular row. You can click on any of these rows and access the individual study page for that particular study. I'm going to go ahead and click on this one since I filled it out already. And again, we'll see at the top, we've got some information about the study. We haven't added too much to this here, but certainly this would be easy to manipulate if you were coding this study. Scrolling down here now, we can actually see that we've got 2 different citations linked to this particular study. And this is really where I think MetaReviewer can be pretty helpful to you along the way, because we often find in that when you're doing full text screening, it's hard to link those studies together, citations together into one study until you start actually coding the data, until you start actually extracting that information. And you say, uh-oh, these 2 citations are linked together. Let's make sure that they are processed together and coded together. So to do that easily, you just go ahead and, again, click on the link citation button, start typing in a value or part of the title. I'm just going to go ahead and try this out. And it says, great, you've linked another citation to this study. And now you can see we've got 3 citations linked. Okay, scrolling down, we can add more PDFs and supporting documentation. And then we come to our workflow and status section. This is another project management section, our first draft of the project management section. And here we've got some basic drop downs to help you keep track of where things are in the process. So we've got eligibility, what's eligible and what's not. This coding status drop down is really helpful. We've got it set up so that you don't have anybody assigned yet. You've got a first coder assigned, a second coder assigned, somebody ready for validation, and then coding complete. I'm going to leave it on assigned and in process. So this is connected to this first coder here. And essentially what this is doing is it's saying, okay, whoever is listed as the first coder, I've only got 2 in here, Megan and I. I'm going to change that back to me. Whoever's listed as coder 1 in here, this particular study is going to show up in their tasks to complete back on that project management page. So if I go back to this particular projects, I skipped over it, but now you can probably see what I'm saying. This task to complete, this section is populated by all the studies that I have in my task to complete in terms of my coding. So if I click on it, it's going to take me right back to this page. So that's a nice way. If you've got coders that maybe only come in, once a week for an hour or 2, and it could be difficult as a coder to come in. You're not always involved with the project, and you sort of lose track of what you should be coding, what you should be working on. Maybe you're the type of project manager that likes to assign people studies and make sure that you're well aware of where everybody is. But this is really going to help you do that and the coder keep track of where they are in the process. If I changed this to Megan, and it says successfully saved, and I go back out, then it says, okay, no more assigned tasks for this particular project. So it updates automatically there. The rest of this is somewhat typical project management. We've got author query status, whether or not the study needs it, and then final inclusion in the actual project. And then finally, down at the bottom, just like the citation, individual citation page, we've got study notes and its history. So you can add a note about what's going on with the study, the history of when it was updated, when it was created, and then this flag for discussion. If you were a coder and you wanted to make sure that in your training meetings and your coding meetings that you're paying attention to this study and you're going to talk about it, you click on this yes button. And then when you go back out to the study's landing page, this study is now flagged for discussion. Whoops, this study is now flagged for discussion. So you can imagine if you had multiple studies here listed, you could sort by this column and identify those studies quickly. So the next thing I want to show you is the coding form and how the coding form actually looks. So to do that, to access the coding form for a particular study. So the way this works is there's a coding form for the project, and then to see the responses, to see the coded data for each particular study, you're going to go back into the individual study page, scroll down to the coding form section, and then you can see there's a little 1 here, and that tells me that there's actually one this study has been coded by one person. So I'm going to click on that. And you can see that I coded it. I updated it pretty recently. And if I click on it, this is what the coding form looks like for this particular study. So I don't have too much information here. And obviously this is all play data, but let's just zoom in a little bit more so everybody can see this. This is my study information page. So the first thing I'll mention is I said that there were sections for study pages. You can go directly to those particular study pages by clicking on this drop down here. You can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections for this particular code book, corresponding to the different information you would collect. And you can see down here, here's some items, some sample items. This one's asking about the peer-reviewed status for this particular study. So this is a drop-down item. And if I click on it, you can see the different choices I have. And if I just clicked unclear, we again get this auto-saved response like this. Great. So let's go to the next section. And here's the samples characteristic page. So this goes back to what I mentioned a few minutes ago about identifying the different samples and coding information for those particular samples in MetaReviewer. So here I've already got this set up. I've got 2 different samples here. I'm actually going to change the name of this one to the comparison group. So I've got a intervention group identified as sample 1 and a comparison group identified as sample 2. Does it constitute the full sample or the subsample? And then lots of different information about the 2 different groups, their sample characteristics. So the urbanicity, the percentage of the sample that were assigned male at birth, and so on and so forth, all the way down the list here. Now we've got the conditions characteristics. So this is for the program characteristics for an intervention study. So again, I'm going to go ahead and create 2 different columns here corresponding to the 2 different conditions, identify the different conditions here, and then some information about how these 2 conditions were formed and what they constituted. Next section is on the outcomes, the measures page. So I've got 2 outcomes, an achievement outcome and an attendance outcome. Each one of those columns, I've got some information that you'd extract about those 2 outcomes. And the last section before the effect size page is on study quality. So questions about pre-registration, questions about differences at baseline. So those 5 pages all lead up to the effect size page, the effect size information page. So I've got 2 rows here corresponding to the 2 contrasts, the 2 effect sizes that I'm going to estimate. I filled in some of the information here, so you can see here at the columns here, the column names. We're going to identify sample 1 and sample 2. So sample 1 corresponds to the intervention. Sample 2 corresponds to the comparison group. Then the condition information. Again, condition 1 corresponds to the intervention. Condition 2 corresponds to the comparison group. And then some information about the outcome, the measure. We've got, we're going to use the achievement data. It's the same out. We're going to assume that this is the same measure for both the pre-test and the post-test. So if this was a different measure at pre-test, obviously you could change this here to a record that represented the pre-test. But for now, we're going to assume that it's exactly the same. Give it a unique ID again. And then finally, we get to, I guess, the most important part of this page, and that's the type of effect size that you'll be coding. Now, we have preloaded in 40 different effect size types. And each of these effect size types, I'm going to just whoa, that's a long list. Each of these effect size types, depending on which one you click, is going to open up a different set of cells that you would need to code in order to estimate the effect size. So for this particular effect size, we are capturing information on standardized mean difference, pre-test and post-test unadjusted mean. So this is just like your basic, descriptive table, table 1, table 2, where you've got the two conditions and pre-test values and post-test values, unadjusted means. So you put in the sample sizes to each of those fields. I'll scroll out, stop scrolling a little bit. Then you put in the pre-test data for the intervention condition, the pre-test data for the comparison group condition, and on down the line. We could do that same thing then for a second row. So we'd identify all of the various conditions and samples, which I'll do, which I've already done. Now we're going to change that to attendance data, attendance outcome. So for our attendance outcome, this one's going to be an odds ratio, and we'll assume that it's an odds ratio with frequencies. So when we click on odds ratios, post-test only frequencies, now only the cells that have to do with that particular effect size are going to populate. So in this case, it's the post-test intervention sample size, comparison group post-test sample sizes, and then all the way over here at the right, the different cells for the frequencies. Currently, MetaReviewer does not actually estimate the effect sizes for you. It just tells you the information that you need to capture. Later versions of MetaReviewer, we hope to be able to add in that functionality to actually be able to show you the effect size that's calculated. But for now, we think this gets you pretty much about 90% of the way to certainly to conducting an efficient process, but also helping coders identify the appropriate information, either that they have or that they need to collect for those studies. What do you do once you've captured all of this information and you want to go ahead and actually start analyzing it, actually get it out of MetaReviewer? Well, to do that, you're going to go back over to this coding forms section, click on view the responses. Actually, I'm sorry, we're not going to do that one. We're going to do this 5E project, which is an actual project that is ongoing right now and using MetaReviewer, internal to AIR. We go to edit coding forms and then view the responses. We can see we've got 79 different responses corresponding to 79 different studies. And if I click download and CSV, a fully integrated flat Excel file is populated. So what I mean by flat is each row is a different effect size contrast, and it's actually going to take those ID variables and pull in that other information from those other pages that you've coded. So each of the sample IDs, each of the condition IDs, it's going to find all that information based on those IDs and pull in that information into this spreadsheet so that you could take this spreadsheet, estimate your effect sizes, and go about analyzing your data right away. Okay, I've covered quite a lot. I see that there are several questions and some chats. So I think for now, I'm gonna pause there and Megan, maybe turn it over to you for a minute.
Excited to see in the questions that people are really thinking about applications to their own work. I want to just briefly describe what it means that today is the beta launch of MetaReviewer, and to just make sure that you know how you can get access and start using the software. So as Josh showed early in the presentation, if you haven't already requested access, you can visit metareviewer.org, click on that Try MetaReviewer button, and complete the access request form. For those of you who have already done so, you should expect to see your login credentials within the next 24 hours here. And new requesters, we're aiming for 1 business day turnaround for all of those credentials. Once you have your login information, that is going to provide you continuous access to MetaReviewer both during and after beta testing, so into the foreseeable future, even after the beta period is done. The official beta testing phase is from now until November 16th. During beta testing, you will have access to our help desk, which you can contact to request help using MetaReviewer. send questions about functionalities, make suggestions for additions or improvement to current functionalities. And we will take that feedback and incorporate it to the extent that we can into the full version, which will launch next year. When you send something to the help desk, we're aiming for about a 2 to 3 business day turnaround at the outer end. So please be patient with us. We're waiting to see kind of what the response is and how many inquiries we get. We also might ask beta users to complete a brief feedback survey on your experience using MetaReviewer. And then over the next year or so, we're going to continue to develop this tool, build additional functionalities. As you saw, we've got some placeholders. We've got some things in the pipeline, both for screening and also for effect size estimation on both the front and back end of the processes. In order to ensure that we can devote our resources to continue to development, after that beta period ends around November 16th, we're going to scale back on the help desk. So we'll be providing very limited or no help desk support. And we will not be accepting new users until the full launch in late summer or early fall of 2023. So if you want access in the next year, now is your chance to request it. And then over the next year, we'll really be building up that functionality. When the full version is ready, if you're a beta user, you'll be automatically transferred over to that full version. So I see we've got a bunch of questions coming in. So I will hand it over to you, Josh, to take some of this.
Amy's got a good question though. So does it work with Google Drive or would it also work with Teams and Dropbox? So right now it only works with Google Drive, but that's a good suggestion in terms of a next step, maybe with Teams, Dropbox. David, hey David, asked if it's possible to make staff assignments in batches, so 20 at a time on the landing page. That is currently something that has been asked for by numerous people who have been alpha testers, but it is not something you will be able to do currently. Evan asks, hey Evan, thanks for joining us. Is it possible to use skip logic in the coding form? Skip logic is so it is possible to use skip logic. It is not built into the coding form templates that I demonstrated, those Google Docs that I demonstrated. It is possible to add it. I mentioned that there's a GUI, there's a graphical user interface that users can use to manipulate the coding forms themselves. And it's based on actually a really easy software called Survey.js. And there's a lot of functionality built in there. And so you could, if you wanted to explore the different options in that that piece of the functionality, that piece of MetaReviewer, and add skip logic, I'm almost positive you could do it there. Right now, though, it's just not built into a coding form template, although that's a really good suggestion for post beta. An anonymous attendee said, is it possible to add additional variables to the effect size information for subgroup analysis purposes? Absolutely. These coding form templates are designed to be a starting place for you. And hopefully we've added enough different, a variety of item types to those Google Doc templates so that you can take and literally copy and paste those tables and make it your own. So absolutely, we'd love to see some development, especially when you're talking about specific group analyses. I think that's a wonderful idea. Yeah, is there a study quality section based on? So not yet, but that's an excellent suggestion. It's something that we've been talking about internally, which is creating templates for lots of different study quality measures or other coding forms that are out there. So Ryan and I are heavily involved in the What Works Clearinghouse, and you could easily imagine this being adapted to a What Works Clearinghouse type study review guide setup. But currently, no, there's no template for Robbins or Cochrane. And he asked about linking studies. What does that mean, and for what purposes? So that's really when if a single data set, a single intervention study, maybe imagine that particular set of primary authors decided they were going to create a study report based on one outcome, and then create a separate report or a separate peer-reviewed paper on a second outcome. So same data set, same maybe student participants or adult participants, whomever, but two different outcomes, and they've reported them across two different papers. We would consider those two papers to be part of the same study. I think most people would consider them to be part of the same study, but they're different citations. They have different PDFs or different citations. You would want to put those two citations, link them together in the same study, and then treat them as the same study and code them together. So that's what linking the study means. Another great question about SRDR+. SRDR+ is a great program as well. And I've talked to their developers a little bit. Their program is a little bit more designed for the medical folks, and it's a little bit more template driven. And I don't want to say anything bad about it because I think it's a great program. Ours is meant to be more flexible, more adaptive, and hopefully like as minimal clicking and not a lot of bells and whistles. But if you're new to meta-analysis, you're new to evidence synthesis, and you just want to start on a program, but you don't want to use spreadsheet software, MetaReviewer will be your go-to program. So I think in terms of functionality, there's a lot of crossover, a lot of similarities, but really, we're really hoping that our program, MetaReviewer, can fit a niche for people who are just getting into meta-analysis. Karen asks about, are we free to share the invitation to MetaReviewer beta with colleagues and students before November 16th? Yes, please do. Absolutely. Noah asked the question about, or says, I'm guessing MetaReviewer gets read, write, share access to our Google account in order to create the files. Does MetaReviewer technically get permission to access our entire Google account or only a specific folder? So it'd only be that specific folder, and it would only be so that it can read the document that MetaReviewer is using in order to create the coding form template in MetaReviewer. Anonymous attendee asks about double coding. So currently, the MetaReviewer is not designed for double coding specifically in terms of like two people code the same study independently. And then ideally, MetaReviewer would sort of compare those two coded studies and tell you where the discrepancies are. That is a functionality that is very high on our list for post beta, but it currently does not have that functionality. The process that Ryan and I have been using quite a bit on our own studies is what we call validation. And this is something that is set up in MetaReviewer. And that's essentially where one person codes the study, does the complete study coding, and then another usually senior level person or just somebody potentially with more systematic review experience comes in and looks at the answer for each of the items and basically double checks all of the coding. And that is something that is MetaReviewer has been designed for, and there are places where you can actually sign off on each of the pages. The validator can sign off on each of the pages, and so you know that all the data that you've entered is complete and ready to go. The next question is, can this work with Zotero or other citation management systems? So it's not, it will not work directly with Zotero in terms of like direct connection, like an API type connection. So the quick answer is no. The longer answer is if you use Zotero for your citation management and use it for screening, abstract screening, full text screening, and then you're left with a list of citations that you need to screen. If you export those citations to a CSV file, it's going to be set up in almost the exact same way our CSV importer is set up. And so you take all of your citations that you've downloaded from Zotero, exported from Zotero, and you can import those into MetaReviewer. Another anonymous attendee asks, this app cannot be used for the screening phase right now. So no, it is primarily designed for data extraction, the data extraction effect size coding phase. Can the user manipulate a citation output CSV from a database by moving columns, or do they need to be cut and paste into the MetaReviewer template? You do need to use our column header template. So as long as those column headers are the same. From our file, you can use whatever file you want.
We have some acknowledgements. We've had a great staff who've worked on this project at AIR, researchers and tech solutions folks. We've had a number of alpha testers who have been using MetaReviewer over the last year on real projects live and providing all sorts of valuable feedback. And then our advisors, Sola Adesope and Erica Vital, have been great along the way as well. So just want to thank them. And again, thank all of you for joining today and sticking with us. We look forward to hearing from you and hearing about your experience.